Hey, my name's Ben Yenny, and I don't make movies. I help filmmakers make money from their movies. Today we're going to talk a little bit about what a producer actually does and what the difference between each producer is. So, there are a few different kinds of producers. I'm sure if you've ever watched a movie, you've seen them. In general, they are line producers, associate producers, co-producers, producers, also known as full producers, and executive producers. Whereas associate producers, co-producers, and full producers are generally different levels within the same hierarchy. But in general, any sort of producer is a business person. Whether they be more in charge of logistics, in the case of the line producer, and often the associate and co-producer as well, or more in terms of the marketing and revenue generation and financing of the film, in the case of full producers, and especially in the case of executive producers. There is also such a thing as a co-executive producer, and the co-executive producer is essentially the same as a co-producer, but their job types tend to fall more in line with the executive producer responsibilities. So let's dive into what they actually do. Line producers are essentially the acting producer on set, and they are very much more a production person than an above the line person, although they are almost always considered above the line, but only just. An associate producer is somebody who handles at least one major task on an independent film, or any film in general. These major tasks generally have something to do with more business tasks. So that if they're the person in charge of dealing with SAG and maintaining that relationship, that might be something that would be billed as an associate producer. They might also be a younger person who is training their way up to be more of a co-producer or full producer. Sometimes people's protege or assistant will end up in this role, although generally to get to that point they have to have done a significant amount of work for this film. This could be something like dealing with SAG and, say, managing all of the social media for the film, as well as managing the relationships with all of the major vendors for the film. Those could be, doing all of that would probably just qualify you for a co-producer title, or at least it should. Unsurprisingly, not all of these guidelines are rigorously enforced. Some friends of mine have done a lot of work where they should have been credited as a full producer, but they weren't due to mainly politics. Another thing that you might end up seeing a associate or co-producer handling is the festival submission process and managing all of that. That's generally considered one of these tasks that might fall under that. If you've got any questions about other tasks that might qualify for associate or co-producer, then maybe drop them in the comments and I'll try to address them. So finally, we come to the full producer, and a full producer manages 4 or more of all of the tasks I've listed before. Generally, the first build full producer will also have a significant hand in the distribution and or financing of the film, but they also are some of the people who brought the team together at all. Essentially, the lead full producer can kind of be viewed as the CEO of the film, and any other producers can be part of their C-suite, so chief marketing officer, financial officer, any title at a big company that starts with a C. A co-producer is essentially a executive vice president. An associate producer is something close to a either vice president or department head. And then once you get down to the line producer, it's essentially a high-level project manager. And executive producers, which are the only job type I haven't touched yet, are generally something like being on the board of directors for a company. And executive producers, which are the only jobs that I haven't touched yet, are something like the board of directors for a company, as they are people who are hyper-focused on the business of the film. These could be the investor liaison, they could be representatives from the distribution company, they could also be representatives from the studio or network, if those apply to you, and those are the people that you really need to make sure are happy, one, because if they're not, and you're the producer, that can end up bad. But in general, a good executive producer is there to help your team make the film and make sure it gets out there and gets seen. So another thing to keep in mind here is most of the time your producer's rep or your PMD will also take either a executive producer or co-executive producer credit because they're helping you get money back into your film, and their tasks are pretty much entirely around the business of the film. A distributor might also take as many as 3 that I've seen, and there are a couple of other instances where an investor themselves might take 1 credit. If they want that, generally I say that they have to have at least 25% of the equity raise for the film in there, or around 40% of bundling non-equity money, and that's the 40% of the entire budget for that to earn that full executive producer credit. And in that instance, unless they brought some equity too, it's rare that I would give them first billing. There are exceptions to this, including people who run major companies, or if you get someone like Tom Cruise in your movie, there's a good chance that they'll get an executive producer credit just for being in your movie. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you liked it, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe. And if you really liked it, consider sharing it. It helps a lot, especially at this early stage of the channel. And if you want to be just the most awesome person in the world, consider dropping a few bucks into my Patreon. This isn't my full-time job, so having that money from that Patreon helps me keep doing it. Oh, and one final thing. If you'd like me to become a producer on your project, use the submission form below. I have separate forms through that one same link to early stage projects that include features, transmedia, and episodic projects, as well as completed of the same, and even a separate form for completed shorts for something that I'm considering but haven't actually enacted yet. So thank you guys so much, and we'll see you next week.